In this episode of Stat Chat, I'm going to be having a look at why it takes so long to move home. If any of you have moved recently or have moved in the past, I'm sure you'll be able to relate with the stresses and problems that can manifest themselves without the sales process. And if you are thinking of moving, it would be well worth keeping an eye on this, because what it will allow you to do is get a better understanding of what you're going to be looking forward to in terms of the timescales and what you can expect going forwards when you do decide to move yourself. So we're going to be going into quite a lot of detail in this presentation, lots of statistics, most of it not good. I'll be honest with you. We'll also do two things. So what we'll do is I'll have a look at the UK as a whole, and then we'll drill down and zoom into Stratford to get the more relevant statistics for all of us here. So in terms of kind of where we're at, as we all know, moving home is one of the most stressful situations. And in part, reason for that is because of the uncertainty. So once you've agreed a sale all the way through to completion, anyone can change their mind at any point without penalty, which, let's face it, is ridiculous. With the amount of money that's involved in property, to have something as basic as that, not being put in place, frankly, is absurd at best. So at the moment, once the sale agreed, it takes an average of 118 days, so that's 17 weeks to get from that you accept an offer through to completion. So that's more than 4 months. And obviously within that time, undoubtedly there's a lot of stress, because you're always sort of on tenterhooks waiting for the phone to ring. If somebody changed their mind, as position changes somebody, which again, is just a real problem fundamentally. So the fall through rate currently in the UK is actually, believe it or not, it's barely 1 in 4, so just under 24%, which is probably the good news, because in years gone by, it's gone up as high as 38%. So the average has always been around about just over 30%. So to kind of get it at that at the moment is actually slightly surprising. So that's a good thing. But then we're going to go into maybe some not such good things. So in terms of kind of the timeline to show how much worse things have got, we've gone back to 2007. So in 2007, so this is when you've agreed a sale to completion, it used to take you 71 days. So after you accept your offer to moving, it's 71 days. As of today, it's now 118 days, which is an increase of over 66%, which, let's face it, seems completely at odds to everything else that we know in the world today, because everything is moving faster. You can order something from Amazon and sometimes get it delivered the same day. You can order products from places and they come almost straight away. So how is it with property that it's going in the opposite direction? It's getting slower and slower and slower. And we will go into that in more detail over the next few slides. So if you look at it as well, what's really quite interesting, this isn't just today's problem. This is being ongoing for decades. So in 1990, it used to take 7 to 8 weeks. And then in 2007, as you saw, it went up to sort of 10 weeks. And as we are now today, it's gone even further again, which again, just seems so bizarre, considering everything is happening so much faster that property is just getting lagged behind. And well, worse, it's in reverse gear. It's going backwards. So why is it? Well, a lot of it goes down to the old-fashioned way of conveyancing and the process that's there. Lots of obstacles, lots of third-party information that has to be given over and taken from one party to the other and passed in timely fashions. It's interesting, though, because if you look at almost every single country in the rest of the world, Scotland included, they've got it down to a T. There's far more penalties involved. There's far more lock-ins early on, whereas in England and Wales, it's a very reactive system. So those systems are very proactive, as in they get something agreed, something's locked in straight away, and you have calling off periods, etc. Whereas we're quite reactive, so nothing really happens until a sale's agreed, and then all the work starts. So that really doesn't help, and that can take weeks and weeks to sort of even just get the basics started. And then, if you look at it, so what's interesting is the amount of time it's now taken to get replies to inquiries is significantly increased as well. So that's gone from 4 weeks to 9 weeks. So again, despite we're seeing more development and improvement in technology, it's still way, way behind the curve. So as you can see here, in 2007, it took 4 weeks to get the replies to inquiries to pre-contract inquiries, and then 9 weeks today. So it's almost doubled, well, it's over doubled. So again, it's really not a good trend we're seeing. And I think you got to then ask your question, well, why is this happening? And a lot of it goes down to workload. The the solicitors as a whole are getting far too many caseloads per solicitor. So therefore, they just can't simply work on the amount of cases at the time that people need them to do. Tight margins. I think that there's levels of expectation because of the way we operate now as a country and just as the world. Everything feels quick. This is so sludgy and slow that it just doesn't make sense. And because people move very infrequently, it always comes as a surprise, because you would have thought, okay, well, when I moved last time, things must have got better this time. And actually, what's happening perversely is it's getting worse, not better. So there's lots of delays, as you can see. Even mortgages is a great example. So the time it used to take, so it's now nearly 9 weeks from instructing your conveyancer to getting your mortgage offer, and that's up from 5 weeks in 2017. So again, what we're seeing is we're not sort of nudging that dial a little bit. It's actually going off the scale and doubling in most cases. Chains is another real issue. So you could be in the most prepared situation yourself, but you are only going to work as fast as the slowest person within the chain, which is where there becomes some real issues later down the line. And partly because there's obviously a lot of fragility there. There's no one getting tied in. So anyone can pull out. I mean, it does seem balmy, doesn't it, really? When the amount of money, God, I'm going to go on a rant now, but I'm actually only 22, believe it or not. It's because I've been doing this. It's made me go grey. But it does astound me that the amount of money involved in property, that this still is allowed to happen. If you think about it, if I go to O2 or Vodafone and I go to a mobile phone contract provider, once I sign that, I'm done. I'm in for 24 months. I can't get out of it. And yet you can have multi-million pound chains of properties to the point where somebody might wake up and go, actually, I'm not going to buy that anymore. And it all just falls down like a pack of cards. It just seems mind-blowing that the amount of time and stress and money that's wasted year on year is just crazy, really. How the politicians haven't got a real good grip of this and really started to change it is beyond me. And let's hope that in the future it does improve, because at the moment, as you can see, things are difficult. If there is a bright spot, believe it or not, and I think this is the sort of beginning of how digitalization is starting to improve the process. Searches have now become quicker. There was an interesting article about 5 years ago, believe it or not, very proud of this, however, but Stratford Council was rated the worst council pretty much in terms of the time it took to get the searches returned. They have improved that, and it's a lot better now than it ever has been. So that is the sort of green light and the beacon of hope that we all have, that I think as that sort of rolls through the other processes and things become slowly more digitized, that will make things more efficient and quicker. So there is some good news, which is an important part, because look, let's take everything we can get at the moment. And the reason, if you watch the last episode, what was interesting is there was a real relationship between time and probability. And that, as you can probably imagine, absolutely shows itself in this fashion. So the problem is, the longer these things go and the longer the chain takes to get itself ready to exchange, just the simple things get in the way. People might lose jobs, people actually move schools. There's a whole manner of different moving parts moving in the background that could affect that position of somebody going. So it is a real problem, which is something that why we really do need to try and speed the process up as best that we possibly can. And then if we go back a stage a little bit, the other thing I wanted to look at is just how long does it actually take to find a buyer in the first place? Because I think these are quite interesting stats, because they essentially all accumulate together to one big number, which is from the beginning to the end, how long does it roughly take? But let's break it down into slightly smaller chunks. So if you look at the average days between UK and Stratford, so at the moment in the UK, it takes 74 days to find a buyer. Now, I was quite surprised about this. We live in Stratford. It's a very buoyant market. It's good. It's actually worse. It's 76 days, which I have to say surprised me somewhat, but it's very close. But I still thought it would be slightly on the better side, not the worse side. So once you then wrap that number together, so how long does it actually take to get the sales conveyancing process to go through? So again, this is from the point from when you've agreed your sale through to completion. And what I've done here, because I thought it was quite useful from our perspective, was relate Stratford against how we perform as a business. So at the moment, it takes 123 days. We, however, take 111 days, which is great for us because that means a real reduction. So we are saving our clients quite a lot of time, and there are lots of ways of how we go about making that happen. Then we've also now got to look at average days from instruction to completion. So that's kind of essentially the full life cycle. So that's from the day that you put the house on the market to the day you hand the keys over. So at the moment, it's 199 days. So your entirety of your process, you're looking at just shy of 200 days. With us, it's 181 days, which is basically 10% faster than what the other people are doing in Stratford currently. So we're very proud of that. And there are a number of ways and means of how we go about that. That's not just luck. There's actually a lot of skill and management and systems in place that we've used to really kind of drill that down, and which I'm constantly trying to improve, as you'd expect as well. So what was interesting, it was just trying to break that down to how does that work out per property type, because different properties do take longer, and I'll sort of jump into a bit more detail of that. So flats and apartments take 144 days, houses take 120 days, and bungalows at the least at 116. So flats, the reason for that, typically most of them, if almost all of them, are leasehold. So therefore what you've got to do, there's an extra step in the conveyancing process, which is called your management pack. You have to order this in. Again, that's one of those third-party suppliers you're reliant upon. So it's ordered and it's come back in. That gives you all the information about ground rent, service charge, etc. So that's typically why leaseholds always take longer than a freehold. And the reason why bungalows typically take less time than houses is because often the demographic of person buying a bungalow is more likely to be cash. So as we saw earlier, the mortgage date has stretched. And because most people going into bungalows are slightly later on in life, they typically will be using cash to buy that property. So therefore, that is why that's a little bit quicker than houses. So what obviously is the most important thing out of this presentation is, well, okay, well, what can you do? Can you influence it? And yes, you can. As we said at the moment and earlier on, there are degrees of frustration that we're never going to get past until the system as a whole is completely revolutionized. However, yes, you can do things that can increase your thing. So depending on the situations you're at, we talked about searches earlier. Historically, when they were taking a long time, it was worthwhile ordering those almost the minute you went onto the market. You as a seller can still order those searches and then sell them to your buyer. Not many people know that. You can do it. It's the same product. It just means you can get ahead of the game. You can buy them in and then you can sell them on. You have to be a little bit careful because there is a bit of a shelf life of those things. So you just need to be a little bit mindful of that. Two very big forms that are quite crazy when you actually look at the depth. They've got worse again. TA6 and a TA10. So what's that? That's a property information form and a fixtures and fittings list. We would really recommend that the minute you go onto the market, you actually find a good lawyer, get them to send you the pack and start filling that in before you've sold. Again, this is getting ahead of that game because these are very lengthy forms. You're talking sort of upwards of sort of 50 pages in some of them. And essentially what it's doing is going lots of information, so like boundary responsibility, who your service is, and then obviously fixtures and fittings is expected. It's fairly obvious what that is, what you're going to leave and what you're going to take. But it's well worth getting those forms in because you don't need to date them, but if you get them done, it just knows that you're a little bit further ahead of the game and you've got yourself nice and prepared. So that's a real good tip there. The other thing as well, if you've got any guarantees, so if you've had the boiler serviced, if you had any EICR, so electrical report done, if you've had any planning permissions recently, dig out all the documentation, so fence certificate for your windows. Make sure you've got all of those certificates in a nice folder so you can present them to the lawyer. And then essentially, once you've kind of done those bits, you are then done. The next bit is then to raise additional inquiries from the other side. So it's well worth kind of essentially getting your pack together. That's a really, really important one. And it goes without saying, obviously, get yourself a good lawyer, or conveyancer, solicitor, whatever you want to call them these days. It's very important. There are, like all professions, there are some good ones, there's lots of good ones. So you do really want to try and make sure you get a proactive one. That's the key bit. And what I will say on that, actually, just as a side note, is like a lot of things in life, you do get what you pay for. So there is absolutely a relationship between what you pay and the service you're going to get. So if you're chasing to the bottom in terms of the solicitor you're going to choose, don't be surprised if you're going to be seeing these numbers. However, if you do pay that bit more, traditionally and typically, you would expect that process to be a bit quicker. You also have obviously different ways of selling nowadays. So you've got the more traditional model, which is, as we all know, you put your house on the market. You then have kind of auctions and modern methods of auctions, which is a bit like a eBay online type auction. You do also have reservation agreements as well, which I'll drill through to in a second. Some of them are better. It really depends on personal circumstances. The majority of the people out there would be better suited to go a traditional model. However, some want to do the auction, and that's right. And there are pros and cons to that as well. The pros being, obviously, you do get locked in. Cons being you can limit your market to a degree in terms of the financial situation of buyers, whether or not they get mortgages and buy your property as well. So it's a bit of a trade-off. But again, we're here to help. So if you've got any questions on that. And the last one, which is probably a new one, which we're actually very proud of here, reservation agreements. So we're the first agent in Stratford to now offer reservation agreements. And what's that? That is essentially exactly as it sounds. It's a document that ties both parties together, because we're fed up, to be honest with you, of seeing so many people get very upset and stressed over something they haven't done wrong personally. We haven't done wrong. It's just that somebody decided to change their mind without really good reason. So we've actually put in place now a reservation agreement, which is all signed off by the Law Society. So if you want some more information on that, obviously reach out and we can let you know about it. And then ultimately, really, you've got to kind of, I've just gone into that again. The reason for why the reservation agreements are so important, like I said, it just gives you that little bit. It actually just allows you to relax and enjoy the process. Because let's face it, moving house when you start that journey is enjoyable. It's exciting, isn't it? You're out there, you're looking at new properties, you're thinking how you might change something, you're picking new colours, kids' bedrooms. There's a lot of really nice, good things that are coming from that. You're looking at how your life might change and evolve. So it seems so frustrating that after all that nice sort of good spirit, that seems ebb away and then gets more into the sort of the stress of it. And so we wanted to put that in place really just to allow people to hopefully have a smooth move and just try to enjoy the process a bit more. And then so looking into the future, I think, is it going to get better? I think undoubtedly it will. I don't think this is an overnight thing. It's clearly, as we've already seen, this industry is way behind everything else. So we've got a huge amount of catching up to do. I think the key things that you can do, like we said, get yourself prepared, get the forms filled in, find a good lawyer, get all your documentation in a one big pack that then you pretty much can deliver it, and you've done the 90% of the work there. All of that will, just those small things, but when the compound effect kicks in, you will notice that will make things a lot smoother and a lot more successful. So, but unfortunately, other than that, those are the limitations of what you can do personally, because we are still, unfortunately, in a world where we're governed by the system that we're working in. So until that changes and reformed completely, we are going to see it. But don't think that you can't influence it, because you absolutely can. And so it goes without saying, really. Obviously, we've covered an awful lot, so thanks for sticking with it. Hopefully you found this information useful. If you are thinking of moving, obviously, please get in touch. We'd love to be able to talk you through things like the reservation agreements, how we've improved our statistics, and how we can get you more of a smoother, secure move. So thanks for watching. Till next time, see you soon.